I'm going to put that QR code on the screen again. My name's Graham. If we've not met before, I work here at the church. This QR code will allow you to put in a question if you want to, that we will try and get some sort of answer to on the 25th, when we have the fourth and final in this series of big questions. We're asking these 4 big questions this evening is what's my purpose in life? We're so glad if you're here thinking through these questions or having conversations with friends who are having these questions in their conversations with you. In a sense, you may well find these evenings and this evening completely unsatisfactory. 1 out of 10 on Church Advisor. And to a certain extent, I'm kind of okay with that. I've got 20 to 30 minutes in a community centre in Kempston to try and say something about these questions, but not everything. I want to say something that continues a conversation, not everything that might end a conversation. And so in the next 20 to 30 minutes, what is my purpose in life? Life can feel a bit like a weird kitchen gadget, can't it? If you get some weird kitchen gadgets, can't you, in life, you can look at these things and go, well, what on earth is that made for? This is one I borrowed from a colleague, and it's not actually the weirdest thing he could have given me by a long shot, as it turns out. Simon gave me this, and as I put a shout out for weird kitchen gadgets on our WhatsApp group, a few people did send me some odd photos, I'm not going to lie, but this really topped it for like, weird kitchen gadget. What on earth is that made for? Can you take any guesses? We'll have a think about that. We'll get to it a little bit later. But life can feel a bit like that, can't it? Like, what is that for? You can often ask the question, what's the meaning of it? Or what is it here for? What am I here for? Why do I exist? What on earth am I here for? Of course, the answer, if you're an atheist, is nothing. You might be having conversations with friends who come from this standpoint, and they would stand with Tim Minchin, a more recent kind of popular atheist thinker and musician, because those two things go together, who in his 2013 graduation speech to the University of Western Australia said, "Life is meaningless." I think it's absurd, he jokes. The idea of seeking meaning in a set of circumstances that happens to exist after 13.8 billion years worth of unguided events. Leave it to humans to think that the universe has a purpose for them. You're a fool, the atheist Tim Minchin would say, to think that life has any sort of purpose or meaning. Or why is that? Because Tim's point of view would be, from an atheistic point of view, that where have we come from? Well, we've come from nothing and nowhere. Life is random chance circumstances, unguided events over billions of years. Where are we going ultimately? Well, you live, you die, you go in the ground, the cycle continues. There is no afterlife or nothing ultimate. And so what do we do in the here and now? Well, kind of whatever you like, really, whatever makes you happy, whatever gets you through, wherever you find your own kind of self-constructed meaning and purpose within. Really, from an atheist point of view, our function, our purpose in life is simply to kind of procreate, to pass on our DNA, to keep the gene pool going. To really believe that anything else brings meaning in life really is just opinion. It really is very, very temporary. But the reason that you're here asking the question, what's my purpose in life, really is because you cannot think like that, can you? You cannot. No one can go through life thinking, my purpose in life is to pass on my DNA. My purpose in life is just to continue the human survival of the fittest gene pool. We do sense that we're here for something more than just kind of that animal instinct and just survival of the fittest. We sense that there must be something about caring for our neighbors, caring for the needy, caring for the newborn, caring for nature. And so we construct a meaning for life. One of my colleagues, Martin, more years ago than probably he would care to think, but wrote a short book called What's It All About? I've got a few copies that you can have as a resource to go and think through this exact thing of where did we come from, where are we going, and what do we do in the here and now? And in it, he quotes the Dalai Lama, who once said that life's purpose is to be happy. On another occasion, Dalai Lama said that the purpose of life was to serve others, which sound good, but which could it be? What if serving someone else comes at the expense of my happiness? Perhaps the most striking quote is from Bertrand Russell, the atheist, prominent thinker of all, one of the most prominent thinkers of all time in the atheist field. It says, unless you assume that there is a God, the question of life's purpose is meaningless. In other words, if you don't believe in God, your life's purpose is a meaningless concept. None of it means anything. None of it counts for anything. It's pointless, meaningless, and purposeless. For more optimistic reading, you can have a copy of this from me after the service. Pointless, meaningless, purposeless. Unless you assume that there is a God in the picture. We search for purpose and meaning in all kinds of places in our life. And the writer of Ecclesiastes, who wrote that first chapter, who writes this book that we had read the first chapter of a minute ago, echoes those kind of words that Tim Minchin said in his quote, in his speech, doesn't he? Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. He starts his whole book. Everything is utterly meaningless. We search for purpose in these areas. Like we try to piece together the puzzle of our lives in various ways. We search for purpose in kind of wisdom and learning and understanding. In our wealth and what we earn and amass. In our work and what we do with our kind of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. We search for purpose in pleasure. What can I get out of this? What can I enjoy? And other people who contribute to our life jigsaw, as it were. How do these pieces fit together, and where do I fit into this whole thing? And the writer of Ecclesiastes basically sets out on the kind of the godless experiment. We're going to do a series in Ecclesiastes at this church in a few months' time. I'd recommend you come back and we dig into it more. I want to give you a very brief overview because the writer of Ecclesiastes does the godless experiment, where he plunges himself into all these areas of the jigsaw puzzle, taking God out of the picture and saying, well, what can I get out of these areas of life? How can I find purpose and meaning in these areas? Let me just give you a very brief run-through as he acknowledges this kind of meaninglessness to life by searching in these places. When he looks to wisdom, the accumulation of knowledge and learning and understanding the world. And then he concludes that just leads to what he says is sorrow and grief. He moves on to wealth, the accumulation of money and possessions. There's this great quote where he says, I found that wealth was hoarded to the harm of its owners, or lost through some misfortune. Whoever loves money never seems to have enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. In the area of work, the writer of Ecclesiastes works hard, dedicates himself to undertake great projects. There is a lot of achievement and assets and employees. And he says that at the end of all that, he says, but it's all just kind of left to the next person. You pass it all on, it's temporary, and then you're forgotten when you're gone. And that led the writer to despair without God in the picture. What about this area of pleasure? Again, the writer of Ecclesiastes, he says, I denied myself nothing. I really went for it. I took God out of the picture and said, I'm going to get all the pleasure out of life as possible, deny myself nothing in the areas of sex and wine and music, art, even laughter, humor, comedy. And he says, it's just meaningless. What does it achieve? He says that laughter is just distraction, it's madness. Of course, here's a sidebar for a moment, and to say, if you were to talk to Tim Minchin about this stuff, you'd say, Tim, what purpose does pleasure and humor and art and beauty even have in life? If you believe we've come from just purely evolution, and evolution is the ruling, dominant worldview, and that's all we're going to, well, art and beauty and music and pleasure itself, it really serves no evolutionary purpose in advancing the species and the survival of the fittest at all. And what about people? Well, as Ecclesiastes goes through, there's a whole load of people that the writer mentions. He talks about providing for family. He talks about raising children. He talks about many romantic partners. Again, employees, students, talks about friends and caring for others. And at the conclusion of that kind of rabbit hole that he goes down, he says, look, all these people in my life share a common destiny. The same destiny overtakes all, he says. There's madness in their hearts whilst they live, and afterwards they join the dead. Even the people in my life that bring meaning and purpose, without God and an ultimate reality in the picture, it's all meaningless. It's all a chasing after the wind. And when the writer of Ecclesiastes uses the word meaningless, he's not saying pointless, he's saying temporary. Meaningless, that the original language you could also transfer out as like temporary, or mist. Like when the mist comes on one of these frosty January mornings, it's there for an hour or two and then it's gone. Or like the flickering flame on a candle, it really is there, and it's gone. Temporary. All of these areas are meaningless in that they are temporary. If we came from nothing and we're going nowhere, then really what we do in this middle bit of life is very, very temporary. Like mist, like a chasing after the wind with no purpose, no reason, no kind of end goal. It's not that these things in and of themselves are bad things or wrong things to have making up the puzzle of our lives. But without God in the picture, they lack any kind of ultimate goal, purpose, meaning. So how do we find meaning in life? If these are all the pieces of the puzzle scattered on our table, how do we fit them together? What on earth are we made for? And so let's go back to it and look at the Bible's big picture. Like, what are we made for? Where did we come from? Like, to look at the kitchen gadget, you would go, what on earth is that for? It's kind of got a loose metal pot, a sort of a metal clamp frame, and then it's almost a workshop-like sort of screw thing. What on earth is this thing made for? The only way I'm going to find out is by going to the person to whom it belongs. Simon, what on earth is this thing made for? A tongue press. No thanks. Right, we'll leave that there. What on earth is this thing made for?
To sort of preserve meat. Well, they have fridges and things. You just compressed it, and it would preserve meat.
It's for preserving meat. So the block of meat goes in there. You clamp it down with the screw. It preserves it in the fridge for a while. But that's what it's for. What on earth is this thing made for? I've had to go to the person who owns it. It would have been better still if I'd gone to the person who designed and made it. what on earth, literally, am I here for? What am I made for? As you open the Bible's big picture kind of starts in Genesis, the Genesis creation account, as God peaks in all that he's made with humanity. And if you'd say, well, where have we come from? What are we made for? Well, we've come not by chance, not by accident, not by random chance, unguided processes like Tim Minchin would have you believe, but by God. By a God who created on purpose you. By a God who made not out of necessity, but out of love for you. You made for his glory, which kind of means our enjoyment of him. That everything we are made for and made to do kind of brings him some sort of glory and enjoyment of himself. That the original humanity are made with abilities. They're made with tasks to do, made with kind of a vocation, a calling. Made to enjoy the created world in which they're in. So what on earth am I here for? Well, what was I made to do originally? I was made on purpose, not by accident. I was made with abilities and a task at hand and a world to enjoy, with people also in it to enjoy alongside with, by a God who made me not by accident but by choice. Now, where are we going? Where are we going? Again, the Bible's big picture ends with the book of Revelation, which kind of reveals something of the final destination, the final goal of all the world, of all humanity. If you get a map out, or you're going to take a long drive somewhere, you put into your sat-nav where you want to go, and the important bit of what you type in there is the destination, because the destination affects the journey. The destination you're going to affects the route that you're going to take. In fact, knowing the destination that you're headed to affects how you experience the journey on the way. And the same is true of life. Where are we going? The question matters because it affects how we travel through life. And as you look at the Bible's big picture, it says that everything that we do now matters because it all ultimately is headed somewhere, and that somewhere is good. That the whole kind of purpose of the human story that God is weaving through the Bible and into all of human history is that God is redeeming all of humankind. That he will remake and restore all things. That we are ultimately going to end up in relationship with him through Jesus. And so now everything we do now ultimately feeds to that destination. And so everything we do now ultimately really matters. Of course, the alternative is it all goes to dust, to nothing. And so what's the point? And so how does that affect the now? How does that affect the now? When you see kind of God's big plan from the start of the Bible to the end, from humanity's creation to humanity's end kind of climactic goal, how do all of the pieces of the puzzle of my life kind of fit into that? Because that is where everything starts to fit. Is when we start to work out, well, what are God's big plans and big purposes for humanity? Well, then I start to figure out where the little pieces of the puzzle and where I fit in myself. Now, again, we haven't got ages tonight, so this is an invitation for you to start reading the Bible with someone or by yourself or in church on a Sunday to work out kind of what further detail is there to God's big plans and purposes for all of humanity and where everything that I find meaning and enjoyment and pleasure, and how does it fit in? How does it fit in? The writer of Ecclesiastes kind of finishes his godless experiment. And at the very end of the book of Ecclesiastes, the writer has this conclusion. He says, now all has been heard, as in he's plumbed the depths of all these areas. He says, here is the conclusion of the matter. Great. Give us the answer. Fear God and keep his commandments. And when the Bible uses the word fear like that, it doesn't mean be scared of. It means have a reverence for, a respect, a deep relational respect through knowing him personally. And keep his commandments. In other words, his commandments for how we're to live life. What on earth am I made for? Well, the designer and maker of life itself, the designer and maker of you and I, knows how life is to be used and lived best. So when I follow his commands, I'm actually living my life according to the designer's instructions. I'm figuring out my purpose in flow with the one who made me. He ends his conclusion by saying, for this is the duty of all mankind. Duty, in other words, the purpose, the goal of all mankind is to live in relational respect and reverence with God, and to follow all that he has mapped out for your life, because he is the designer and maker of life. And so those commands that he has actually are for our flourishing in all of these areas. There's a 17th century piece of writing called the Westminster Catechism. Some of you were maybe around at the time when it was written, but you remember that the Westminster Catechism addresses this issue. It looks at the whole of the Bible and all of human history and says, well, what is the point? What is the goal and the kind of the end goal, the telos? The telos means kind of the end point, the reason for living of humanity. And it says humanity's chief end or goal or purpose is to glorify God. It's to enjoy him forever. To know his flourishing in all of these areas. Again, let me just give you a very, very brief overview of what the Bible would say in these different areas. It would say that wisdom is given, not just gained. That wisdom is given so that we can know about God and know his commands and purposes. Wisdom is given so we can understand creation. Another sidebar, if you're into science, science was founded on Christian thinkers. We're made to believe that there's some sort of battle going on between science and Christianity now, but science was found, the first scientists were Christians. You know that, right? You do now. Because they founded it on the assumption that there is an order and a creation that you can study, that it's not just random, that experiments will happen in a controlled way because there is an order and a pattern to what we perceive. Sidebar over. Wisdom is given, not just gained, in order to make good and fair decisions at home and at work. Not just kind of subjectively, morally, whether that's good or bad, but kind of objectively, this is morally good and bad decisions in home and work. In the area of wealth, again, the Bible would say that wealth is a gift. It's not granted. It's not a given. That our wealth, our money is a tool, not a goal in itself. That we're to steward it, not store it. And not let it give us a complete sense of significance. That we can use wealth for a greater kind of feeding into a community. Whether that's the local church as the body of Christ, or whether that's to bless our community, to be useful by God the Almighty, to bless a local town by using our money, providing for a family. The Bible says that's a good way of using wealth. What about work? Work is a vocation, not for a vacation. Sorry about that one. Our work is a vocation, not just for a vacation. It's a calling. It's something to give ourselves to. Not just we're churning out day after day in order to go on holiday, maybe. That work is a gift. We could use our own talents and our own gifts to kind of look after the world, to be creative, to seek excellence in art and beauty and design, to bring order from chaos. Whether that's sweeping the factory floor, tidying the shop shelves, doing nappies, all those things bring order from chaos. That's a very godly characteristic. To provide, to release potential, to further human flourishing. Those are all vocations. What about this area of pleasure? Pleasure is for enjoyment, not just from evolution. Again, a pleasure and enjoyment of beauty and they serve no evolutionary purpose. They're gifts from God for our enjoyment. It makes us very grateful to the giver. It shows God's kindness, and ultimately it points towards the pleasures of eternity. Our enjoyment of temporary pleasures now point towards the eternal pleasures of heaven. And people, where do they fit in? In God's big picture, in God's word, the Bible, people are made in the image of God, not just bags of chemicals. Evolution says that you are just atoms surviving. God says you are made to be like me and in relationship with me. That gives a purpose to all you do, doesn't it? It gives a purpose to you as a person. It gives a purpose to the people who are in your lives. It means that you can put others first, not just because it's your opinion that that's a good thing to do, because ultimately they are created, loved human beings in the image of God. We can love our neighbor as ourselves, but go a step further and love our enemy, as the Bible tells us to do. We can bring up children, not just seeing them as little bags of inconvenient chemicals mashing around, spoiling our... Sorry. It's been a long day. But that's what they are, isn't it? I mean, unless they are designed, made, loved image of God bearers, children are they're just a part of the process of passing on procreation. But they're not. Part of our purpose with these little ones is to pass on knowing God, glorifying God, enjoying Him forever. That's much bigger than the small purposes I can make for my life. The Bible has purposes for marriage, for friendships, for strangers. The Bible has purposes for employees, for bosses, the poor. It says that caring for other people demonstrates something of God's care for us. And it even goes one step further. In Matthew 25, Jesus says, if you care for the stranger, if you care for the needy, if you care for those who need it, it's not just being nice. Jesus says it's like caring for Jesus himself. You want to find a bigger purpose for your life? Devote it to finding God's big plans and purposes. When His big picture makes sense of where all the pieces of my life fit together the best. It's where all these things find their fit in His plans and purposes. And so what on earth am I made for? What on earth am I made for? Well, where have I come from? Well, we're created, we're not accidental. We're known, we're loved, we're created with reason, not at random. Where are we going? It's all ultimately going to matter. What we choose and decide now will all ultimately matter in the end, as God redeems and restores all things. So what about now? purpose of my life now then, given those two things, are to participate in God's plans and purposes. To know God personally through relationship with Jesus. And to use all those pieces of the puzzle of my life to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Thanks, Simon.